Alberto Mondragon was arrested for a civil violation, not having proper paperwork. The next morning, he woke up in a hospital with 8 skull fractures and 5 brain hemorrhages. ICE claimed that he ran into a wall, voluntarily just ran into a wall. But every medical examiner says that that story does not match the injuries. There's no body cam footage, none of the officers involved have been publicly identified, and there's no independent investigation. Luckily, Alberto Mondragon survived. But if this pattern continues to happen, many people will not. So here's what we know. Reporting from NPR shows that Alberto Mondragon suffered 8 skull fractures, 5 brain bleeds, and critical injuries that required emergency hospitalization. The officers told nurses that Castaneda Mondragon purposely ran headfirst into a brick wall, an account his caregivers immediately doubted. A CT scan showed fractures to the front, back, and both sides of his skull. Injuries a doctor told AP were inconsistent with a fall. There was never a wall, Castaneda Mondragon said in Spanish, recalling ICE officers striking him with the same metal rod used to break windows of the vehicle he was in. He later identified it in an ASP, a telescoping baton routinely carried by law enforcement. At least one ICE officer later told staff at the medical center that Castaneda Mondragon got his shit rocked, according to court documents filed by a lawyer seeking his release and nurses who spoke with AP. AP interviewed a doctor and 5 nurses about Castaneda Mondragon's treatment at Hennepin County Medical Center and the presence of ICE officers inside the hospital. They spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss patient care and feared retaliation. AP also consulted an outside physician who affirmed the injuries were inconsistent with an accidental fall or running into a wall. Again, there is no body cam footage of the incident, and the Department of Homeland Security has refused to open an internal investigation. Everything outside of what they're legally required to do as federal agents. Besides this horrific and brutal injury, there's another part of the story that's equally important to emphasize. Alberto Mondragon was here legally. He came to the United States through the legal process, overstayed his visa, and had no violent criminal record. This is not a case that ICE is supposed to be focused on. And later, a judge said that the arrest itself was unlawful. This wasn't a violent criminal. This was someone going through a civil immigration case and ended up having life threatening brain injuries. In an interview with the Associated Press, Mondragon explains his experience, at least what he can remember. He has 8 skull fractures, keep in mind.
Nos quebraron los vidrios de los autos, nos abrieron las puertas por la fuerza y a él no lo golpearon, pero a mí me empezaron a golpear de inmediato cuando me detuvieron. Recuerdo que cuando estuvimos en sus oficinas de ICE, yo le dije a él que me dolía demasiado la cabeza, que no podía recordar nada, y él solo absolutamente se rió de mí, me volvió a golpear y caí desmayado de inmediato. Yo tardé para despertar al parecer 5 o 6 días. Estaba yo
Jeez.
muy grave, los golpes en mi cabeza fueron muy fuertes. Yo perdí mi memoria por completo al 100% sobre mi pasado. Las enfermeras, todas las personas que estuvieron al pendiente de mí fueron muy buenas personas. Siempre que llegaban conmigo, Alberto, ¿de dónde, cómo se llama el lugar donde vives? Lo siento, no lo recuerdo. Todas las mañanas me hacían la pregunta y yo lo había olvidado. Todas las mañanas para poder estar al pendiente de mí. Algo muy difícil cuando yo desperté y me entregaron mi móvil en el hospital y le realicé una llamada a mi hija para saber de ella, para recordarla, y cuando la vi por primera vez para mí fue muy difícil pensar, ¿ella es mi hija? Yo no recuerdo haber tenido una hija, yo no recuerdo a mis padres. Vaya, cuando hablé con mi hija, le digo, hola, soy tu padre. Sí, tú eres mi papá, ¿me recuerdas? ¿Te acuerdas que cumplí mis 5 años y estuviste conmigo? Bailamos toda la noche. Y la verdad son momentos que yo he podido olvidar. No puedo conseguir un trabajo a como estoy herido aún. Mi cuerpo aún se mantiene muy herido, lamentablemente, hasta para obtener un baño, para bañar, lavar mi cuerpo y todo eso. Pues si tiene uno miedo a volver a salir y que te agarre ahí de nuevo y recuerde que tiene problemas contigo, que te golpeó y todo, vuelva a suceder o te envíe a tu país. Cuando desde tu país depende la gente, depende tu hija, dependen tus padres.
I don't care how pro ICE you are, if you already have those biases, everybody should recognize this as horrific. Brain, your entire body relies and is contingent on your brain health. If you have life threatening brain injuries from a federal officer, you should want an internal review or investigation to take place to come out with some transparency on why that force was necessary. because it's clear he didn't have the track record to require that type of force. He was not a violent criminal. He committed no violent crime. The only thing that he is guilty of is overstaying a visa. The environment that these arrests are happening and the way that ICE is conducting themselves across the country make these predictable patterns. This is not happening in isolation. There are reports from the Associated Press that also show that ICE agents are using ruses and disguises in order to increase arrests in these neighborhoods. Many legal advocates are saying that this creates confusion amongst neighborhoods, creates panic and fear, and makes these encounters much more volatile when it comes to violent force that's applied. When enforcement is aggressive like this and is less transparent, the risk of escalation goes up substantially. This is a visual that shows the comparison between an ICE heat map, where most of the ICE activity is happening across the country, and the 2024 election map. So, this is where the big hotspots are for ICE activity right now. And this is the 2024 election. All of the biggest places are happening in blue cities. They're specifically getting targeted. And a big reason why is the Trump administration acts on retribution. Their whole mantra is if you do not show loyalty to our administration, you will be punished, oftentimes with violent and extreme force. If this same incident happened with local law enforcement, a police officer that detained someone and broke their skull 8 times, there would be immediate public accountability, identified officers, internal investigation, and public records of the incident just to bring some transparency to the public on why that force was necessary. But ICE operates completely outside of those legal bounds. There are no body cams. There is no outside investigation. And if you're not able to properly identify which officer harmed you, then you can't hold them accountable to prevent them from doing that to somebody else. And the legal landscape is moving to give immigration authorities even more power. This recent article from Common Dreams shows that a court decision upheld extended detention policies allowing the government to hold large numbers of people for extended periods of time. This is why this is the most pressing part of this whole story. If an agency can hold you indefinitely, it controls the entire timeline. There is no information that's released, and oftentimes there's no evidence that's released in those detentions. That makes accountability even harder. American Immigration Council senior official Aaron Recklin Melnick said that awful news for due process. This decision will wipe out the availability of release through bond for tens of thousands of people detained in or transported to Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi by ICE. Let me restate this as clearly as possible. Mondragon received 8 skull fractures, 5 brain hemorrhages, and a judge said that his arrest itself was unlawful. And still, there's been no investigation, no names, no accountability. If the federal government is able to detain people with zero transparency or zero explanation to why there are mysterious injuries happening to these detainees with zero violent criminal records, the question is not whether or not that this is happening, it's how many people it's happening to.